All right. Hello and welcome to the Not My Job Pod. I am your host, Emily Gant, and today I am joined by Peter Sum, who I was actually nervous to invite on this podcast because I feel like if work hasn't heard about my side endeavor by now, they're about to. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
So you and I have never worked together, but I do currently work for the company that you used to work for. So yeah, if I guess go ahead, introduce yourself, and yeah, what's kind of the elevator pitch here?
Sure. Um, so my name is Peter, originally from Canada. Moved to Berlin about 5 years ago during COVID, which was an interesting time to be moving. But for kind of 15 years, I was working in tech companies, helping to build early stage startups, often joining as marketing hire number one and building companies from sort of seed stage through to Series B. And had a chance to work in a bunch of different verticals. I was in gaming and then I was in healthcare. Did a little bit of ed tech. And then around the time I left my career, I was working for kind of a B2B SaaS company, which is the company that we both have spent some time at, and was actually loving it. And the company was great, but decided that I wanted to spend some time outside of tech and explore if I could find something in life that could actually um, align with where I felt like my life was moving towards, something that felt more like something I loved really deeply, that I was passionate about. And so I jumped into the world of food and kind of worked at a few different kitchens in Berlin, went to culinary school in Italy, and then when I came back, I started my own food business, which was Kenzie. And it's kind of like a series of supper clubs and pop-ups and events and this type of thing. And for the last year and a half, I've been working on that and loving it.
I'm curious too, like when you entered, because I got into tech by accident. When you entered the world of tech, were you like, this is where I'm going to be for, at the time, a number of years? Or were you always kind of like, this isn't for me?
It was definitely so. It was by accident, but I fell in love with it. Um,
Mhm.
when I went to university, was still kind of very much following the prototypical path that I felt like was the right path to go down.
Mhm.
I was good at science in school, in high school, and so I decided, hey, why don't I go into science in university? So I spent my first year in biomed. And then each year in school, I kind of realized that the thing I was studying really wasn't something I was super excited about. So I was spent a year in biomed and realized that all the kids that were succeeding in that program really loved it, and I didn't feel the same way. So I switched into psych, and a similar thing happened. Switched into music, and a similar thing happened. And then I wrapped up in business. And luckily, while I was kind of going through that crazy shift in programs, I found startups. And I think what I loved about it was just this young energy of like, you can get out there and start having an impact on the world. And it was a crazy energy to be around. Like all the kids around me were kind of leaving university to go and start their own businesses and raising money from investors and all this type of stuff. And I really kind of got swept away by that and kind of landed into marketing, and just because that seemed to be the best fit for me at these companies. And I didn't have to use my degree to kind of find a job. Luckily, I just kind of through my network and through having kind of found my way through the startup world initially, found my first set of jobs and then kind of grew my career from there.
Nice.
But I would say that for the first five, even longer, like 5, 10 years in startups, it was also something that I deeply loved and was really excited about. And everything I was doing at work and outside of work really revolved around that. And it just kind of happened that that passion started to fade and it was time to move into something else.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in general is changing in our generation, but especially with Gen Z. Like, there's no longer, it might be different for you, but I feel like our parents' generation, it was very much like you choose a job and you do that for 40 years and then that's it. And honestly, I don't know anyone who's been in the same job for more than like 3 to 5 years. So, like, I think it's a big shift. How has do you think it's Berlin as well that has had like an influence on like deciding to make that shift? Or yeah, what was going on kind of in the environment that you were like, I'm going to leave this really well-paid tech job for a passion?
For sure. I would say, so where was I going to start? So I think I've always been someone who wanted to kind of take a more alternative path in life. And I think the definition of alternative has really expanded the older I've gotten and also moving cities. So I think kind of not following the corporate path and going down the startup kind of journey for me at the time felt quite alternative. Like I was doing the thing that no one else was doing. And I think when I was in Toronto nearing the time I moved, I was around 30, and I just found that there was a lot of pressure, even though it was unspoken, to follow a certain path. A lot of the friends I had were kind of going down this, Canadian dream of buying a home and then owning a cottage and having a kids. And it all just felt like everyone was doing the exact same thing. And there was definitely this anxiety that it created that was like, is this actually my own life? Is this something that I'm consciously building, or am I just following because everyone around me is doing that? And had I stayed in Canada, I don't know if I would have gotten to the level of understanding of what alternative means, and probably would have just continued down the path of, going down the startup thing, maybe becoming a VP or CMO of early stage company or something like that. And then I came to Berlin, and that definition of alternative really started to expand. I met people who were living really differently from what I was used to, in every aspect of their life, whether it was relationships, how they thought about earning, how they thought about their homes. Like some people I know here are kind of like living in these like communes where they pay maybe 200 euros a month, and they're building this kind of home together with other people, and just like really kind of challenging a lot of things that I had thought about what I needed in life. And so going down the food path felt a lot more natural here. I feel like a lot more people here choose the thing that they're supposed to, like, they feel called to do in life. And I think, yeah, this idea of going down the food journey just felt like something that was natural here, and not
Mhm.
back home. It felt more like, okay, you were really kind of an outlier if you were going to do that. So yes, Berlin, to answer your question, I think Berlin did have a pretty big influence.
Berlin pushes the envelope of what's possible, and sometimes it's about how many people show up more so than like how much money you can make on a project at
Mhm.
determining its success. So I'm curious kind of how community has played a role in, because kind of in my opinion, what you're doing is creating a community of your own, but also with strangers who are sometimes quite different and maybe not exactly what you're looking for. So
Mhm.
how has community kind of played a role in this?
I mean, I've met a lot of my community in sort of the party and nightlife scene here in Berlin. And I say nightlife, it's not even nightlife, it's just kind of like weekend life. And it's I mean, the definition of sort of like, I would say that, when you say party or when you say music, back home, again, that meant something quite different. I think back home, it was like very much this surface level of like partying as a kid and like maybe getting fucked up or whatever and taking, drugs unconsciously and all this type of stuff. And way less about connection and getting to know people and exploring sort of like what it means to feel free and all this type of stuff. And I think that like when I came to Berlin, there was this second wind of, going out and enjoying music and meeting people through that scene. I would say community fits much better as a word going out now here in Berlin than back home. And I've met some really incredible people who are really supportive of your art, of what you're doing. And it's actually, I would say, like the number one source of people who have come and tried out sort of Kenzie and all the different concepts I've been doing have been people that I've met through the music scene here, which is amazing. It's like there's this type of connection that you meet with people who kind of share that similar lifestyle, who then are really eager to sort of support some of your other projects and vice versa. And so, yeah, I would say that another aspect as well is that when I came here in Berlin, I would say that I felt very much like this, expat who was making a US salary in Berlin, benefiting from everything that Berlin had to offer, but really kind of like sucking at the value of Berlin, but not giving anything back. And I think that this journey into food has also been something that's felt much more like now I'm actually part of the community, that I'm like creating these experiences for people in Berlin and actually doing my part in actually trying to create, a nice Berlin for everyone. And so it's like the starting point, but I also feel like that shift has made me feel more connected to the city because I'm actually creating in the city.
it's not just music, it's art as well. Like, I don't know, some people are creatively inclined to like building things, so they're building these crazy structures that, are this like maze that then, I don't know, it's like an adult creative playground in like new ways that I haven't considered or seen in any other city. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think, yeah, that is so interesting because like at the same time, I think there's kind of this idea that you can be like poor and enjoy Berlin, and I do genuinely think that that has changed. I don't think that like the poor but sexy is still really a Berlin thing. And I would say like the experiences that you're hosting are like higher end. So kind of how do you reckon with providing sort of a creative service that's like a little bit, higher end, higher price compared to like, I don't know, other creative pursuits that maybe are a bit more kind of conventionally what we think of when we think of like price points in Berlin.
I think that some of the pricing positioning that I've done with Kenzie, I think is there's a few things. I think one is what are the constraints that I'm working with, and so one is the number of seats that I can offer at my place right now. So, for instance, right now I run a supper club for my apartment, or I maybe do a workshop or something, and the capacity is like 15 people. And so I think one of the things that has led to the pricing and sort of how I've thought about branding is just the constraint of not being able to offer my food to like 100 plus people. If I could, then I think the pricing would probably feel a little bit different. And like some of my pop ups, for instance, are a little bit more accessible. But I think on the other side as well, it's like trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I stand for when it comes to food? Who am I as a chef? Still struggling with that label, but who am I as a chef? And what kind of do I like to do? And what am I creatively inspired to do? And so I think coming out of school, I was definitely feeling excited about sort of this fine dining way of plating food and presenting food and cooking food. And I think that's also kind of what's led to what I've been doing right now, which is like, yeah, more like this fine dining path. So it's like a combination of constraints, what I feel inspired in, like who am I as a chef? And I don't think I figured that out yet, but right now that's something I'm exploring, which has led to like a little bit more expensive offerings from being able to go down the street, buy a tuna and whatnot. I do think that like compared to other offerings at a similar level, I think I am able to price a little bit more in an accessible way, given that I'm not dealing with the same issues of like paying a lot of labor costs, for instance, this type of stuff. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. But long term, I also feel like I want to move a little bit more from like upmarket to like mid market or something that's like even more accessible. So whether that's through Italian food or through some other food that I want to kind of bring to Berlin that's more sort of from my background where my family's from. I hope to have, something that's kind of yeah, more accessible in the future as well.
I think it's interesting that you even responded quite like that, because in my head you could be charging a whole lot more. And there is a market for that as well. So yeah, it is kind of I guess, an interesting balance of, yeah, who you want to
Yeah.
be and who you
I
want to
mean,
serve.
I think what's hard as well, I feel like a lot of people in Berlin are passionate and want to share their art and are very anti making money,
Mhm.
almost to the point where it's just not sustainable. There's so many projects that go on like, hey, we're a collective, we're doing this pop up or we're doing this, music thing. And really at the end of the day, you're like not also just not valuing your own time and the effort that you're putting into it. And I see a lot of people kind of burning out down that path or just not being able to sustain sort of the art and the creative stuff that they're doing. So I think coming from this kind of startup background as well, it's like understanding, okay, what do I actually need to be earning to sustain the lifestyle that I want here? And having that be an important component to building out, okay, well, how does all the math work once I like, pay out everyone that's helping out and everything? Like there has to be enough left over to survive. And I think that's important and not always something that people think about.
Yeah, I think there's kind of this, yeah, stigma almost as if like, because if it's like you care about money, then you're kind of in some groups seen as like kind of a bad person. But then at the same time, it's like you can't really be creative unless your basic needs are met and covered and you aren't
Mhm.
stressed about, keeping a roof over your own head.
And really, like, if you're doing your art, you're really not focused on making money. Like, if you're focused on making money, you're sticking to like the old career that I was in. You know, I have a lot more appreciation now for restaurants and what they charge, and very happy to pay money for food now, knowing like, okay, people don't start restaurants to become wealthy. They really do it for other reasons.
Yeah. I'm curious though, I guess and I do want to kind of jump in later to like all of the inspirations behind the actual like food and the creative process itself. But I'm curious, like from a business side, like are you currently, I don't even know how it works in Germany. Like, do you count as like a freelancer? You just vibe in? Or are you like trying, to like set up a side business or?
It's like self-employed visa and like working towards like building all the permits and things related to that. So that's kind of the path. And I think there's a few different paths, but that's kind of the one I've chosen.
So are you currently like dealing with all the visa stuff on top of all of this? So you're not even like coasting on residency and living life. Okay. And has that contributed to, I feel stressed now that I've just asked that question. Does that contribute to your overall stress levels in life or
It contributes to the stress levels of the people around me in life.
okay.
And I feel like I'm someone who is just really bad at getting all of the life admin stuff like in place and maybe like being proactive around it. So I'm just kind of easy go lucky, kind of like moving through this and feeling like it's moving. But I mean, I think other people would probably move through it a lot faster than the pace I've moved. Just like feeling like, um, it'll all take care of itself. That's kind of like I tend to kind of lean more on that path and being very flexible with outcomes that aren't exactly what I'm looking for. So like, okay, maybe there's a chance that I have to spend a few months outside of Europe, for instance, then maybe I just have to do that. So that's kind of the path I've taken. And that does create a lot of stress and anxiety for the people around me. They're like, you need to be sorting this stuff out ASAP. And I think I've been moving through it. I am like, there's progress. So yeah.
No, I mean, I guess it's not, in my case at least, I dealt with just, and I think a lot of immigrants here do, like they take a job at a company that just like exploits them beyond all measure. And then they just like suck it up and deal with it because they're like, I have X more days until I get residency. And then, yeah, sure enough, the minute I had residency, it was like, I was like, I need to like reprogram my entire outlook on life and like every sort of like scarcity mindset that I had for the last like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So I
There's
don't think it's a bad thing.
aspect of like, having come through tech with like a lot of people who are just like their jobs was to kind of take care of that for me. Like a lot of gratitude for kind of having come through that path, gotten like the blue cards and work permits through tech and realizing kind of going down this path of building your own thing that it's just there's a lot of stuff that was taken care of for me that now I have to take care of for myself.
Okay, that is annoying, but it seems like you have the right attitude about it. I feel like those kind of people always end up kind of landing on their feet, so it'll be all right.
Yeah, I think so. If not, it's also okay. Like I feel like I'm okay with usually I think of every scenario, it's like what's the worst case scenario? And worst case scenario isn't really that bad.
I did that once too.
I go home to Canada and spend time with my niece and nephew and just like hang out there and like figure out a plan back and like okay, that's not that bad of a worst case scenario. So oftentimes I think being comfortable with life as it changes around you, like nothing is ever predictable. You can't control much in life at all. So
No, I think you can't control much, but you can control like some things. But then I feel like sometimes if I'm like, okay, I've controlled all of these things, and then if it still doesn't work out, then it wasn't meant to be mine, and that's fine. But yeah, I've also done that exact same exercise, and then I realized I was like, my worst case scenario is like I have like 10 people who I like whose sofa I can go sleep on, and then I was like, all right, wait, it doesn't matter, nothing matters.
yeah.
And that's always enjoyable too. But
Mhm.
okay, that's the perfect segue though. You mentioned your niece. So that's Kenzie, the inspiration behind the name. So can you tell a little bit more about kind of where the name came from and why is it Kenzie Club?
So I think maybe just a few steps back. So when I left my tech job, this was like June 2024, and I just knew that I wanted to explore a path in life where I was doing something I loved every day and work didn't feel like work. And I wasn't getting that through startups. And I felt like food was the best guess I had. And so I started working in like actually the starting point was just, okay, let's do the thing that I love the most, which was cook. So I was at home just cooking, making content. And then from there, it just kind of very naturally evolved to, okay, well, it would be cool to learn in a restaurant and see, okay, what does it actually feel like to go and work at restaurants? And so I went and did that for a while. Realized there's a lot I learned and loved, but also a lot that I learned that I kind of gained insight into, maybe I don't want to do a restaurant. I don't want to own a restaurant. I had friends that did that and just felt like not a good trade. And so when I came back from school, I was like, okay, I want to be in food, but I don't want to do a restaurant. I had some, I guess, information already, but from there it was like, okay, well, let's just keep exploring. Let's just keep doing things that I feel inspired to do. Let's not look that far ahead. Let's just start doing things that felt right in the moment. And so what came to mind was separate clubs. And, from my apartment was a lot easier than trying to, find a space, pay for a space. And so I kind of started there and was thinking through a bunch of different ideas. I thought for a while I wanted to do food from southern China, which is where my family's from. But having come from Italy, I felt just very close to Italian food, felt like that was the most authentic way for me to cook for people because I was there and had tasted the food and learned a lot of recipes from people who live there and all of this. And as I thought through, okay, well, what is the concept? What is the idea? I wanted to kind of come up with something that felt really pure, and also doesn't kind of like lock me into a specific cuisine because I know I wanted to explore. So I didn't want something that felt super Italian, didn't want something that felt like really Chinese or whatnot, and just landed on Kenzie because, when I think about my niece, I think about, this pure love for food that she has, that she's had since she was really little. And I have this special connection with my niece because before I moved here in Berlin, I lived my sister's basement for I think it was like 6 months or 3 to 6 months during COVID, during the pandemic. And Mackenzie was still under one at the time. And so we spent a lot of time together and I watched her and observed her and her love for food and how it grew. And so it just, when the name came up, I was like, Kenzie just feels like the right thing to name it. And she's like a tiny little gourmet. Her favorite food was like charcuterie at a very early age. She can name many, many different types of cheese. And we cook together when I'm home back in Canada. And yeah, it just, when I cook, it reminds me of her. It reminds me of sort of when I first started falling in love with food as a chubby little Asian kid. And I try and kind of bring that love of food into everything I do with Kenzie.
So you're going to be seeing her though in this month, next month. I don't know,
Yeah, soon.
December,
Two,
whenever
two
this
weeks,
is.
3 weeks, I'll be back and
Nice.
see her and Jack, who's her little brother, and my sister and brother-in-law. I see them once a year, so it's a special time, and I feel like I've grown a lot as a chef since I last cooked for them. So I'm eager to show them the new skills.
Have you planned anything like specific to cook for her, or is it like toddler friendly, or is it like I don't
We
know?
will see. I think I feel a role in pushing maybe her palate a little bit, like trying stuff that she maybe hasn't tried before, but also being like understanding that she's still 6. So I
Oh,
mean,
not a toddler anymore. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Time is gone.
yeah. But like I think when she was young, she like went to like my sister and brother-in-law went to like a fancy hotel outside of Toronto and there was this tasting menu and instead of feeding her like the kids menu, she had like a small version of like the tasting menu that the adults had. So I think she's capable and ready to taste some stuff that I can cook for her that's kind of from what I'm cooking here.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like that'll be like the good litmus test of like, is my food good? Does Kenzie like it?
Yeah. If she doesn't eat it, then we have a problem.
Yeah, there we go. So then, because you've been through a few iterations now of the menu, still focused on Italian food, but then kind of how has that changed as you've kind of slowly started to get more comfortable making things or making things for groups or experimented? What changes have you seen in yourself as you're designing the new menu?
I mean, I think it's still very early. The first menu was very heavily inspired by things that I had kind of created when I was at school. And then the autumn menu, which kind of started about a month or two ago, was kind of the first time in Berlin, kind of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I, what are the things that are important to me when I come up with a new menu? Where are the sources of inspiration? I think it's still very heavily rooted in Italy. And I think oftentimes I'm trying to find things that I feel like are things that people may not have tried, either regions of Italy that are less exported to the rest of the world, maybe like some types of pasta that they may not have eaten before. So I think that's like regional parts of Italy that are less exposed to the world is one area of inspiration. And what's in season for sure is as well. And then I think kind of a subtle accent to that is like, what are some things that I'm familiar with having grown up in more like Asian household with like Asian flavors and things that I can kind of layer in as well that kind of adds my own touch to these things. And so I think I did that a little bit more with the second menu. Like, what are some ingredients that I'm really comfortable with from that aren't typical from Italy? So, for instance, this menu has like some Szechuan peppercorn, some shiso leaf, some like chili oil, some stuff like this that are just kind of like some accents to fundamentally much more traditional kind of ways of cooking Italian food. But also not wanting to overdo it because I feel like sometimes like um, fusion food or creating hybrid too quickly can sort of uh, take you away from the essence of what the thing is supposed to be.
Mhm.
So I think with Italian food, I still very much lean on their philosophy of cooking and their yeah the way that they think about simplicity and freshness of ingredients and all this type of stuff. So, I mean, it's still very early in terms of figuring out what my food is. I think there's a lot of things in my head that I haven't been able to express yet. So, trying to figure out like the right time and place for that too. And I think it's just this process of like trial and error, figuring out, oh, hey, I did this. This felt like me. This felt like me trying to be something else. Or like this felt like me just learning something on the internet and getting excited and wanting to put that on a plate. Like all of it is kind of part of the trial and error of figuring out who I am. And that's also like, I think, a lifelong journey of figuring out what your food style is and who you are, similar to like, if you're a painter, maybe you start with copying and then you kind of layer some stuff in as you go. I think food is the same thing. It's like, you're learning techniques and recipes and all of this. And as you go, you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the things that feel like they should stay or go?
I think that's I don't know, like anything, everything always has, like, a feeling associated with it. I don't know, like, the way you described that kinda reminds me of, like, I asked a friend if he wanted to go to this bar in Vetting, and he was like, "No, I don't go I have weird memories associated with Vetting." I was like, "Alright," like, I don't know, he's like, "I can't go there anymore." Like, it was a weird time in my life. And I'm like, "Alright, fair enough." So I feel like oftentimes that happens with places or, like, music. Has that ever happened to you with food?
I think like there's definitely some things that you can't fully describe and it's just a feeling. I think there's a lot of information that we collect sort of at that level, like the subconscious level, that is still information that you just can't put words to. And so I think it's important to listen to that to like kind of build this intuition over time. And it's okay that it's not something that you can break down super rationally. I think like that's just information that you can listen to in addition to like some of the more like maybe data driven quantitative or whatever, like easy to describe stuff. So I think it all kind of adds together.
Yeah. I'm curious though, because I know you've talked about before that there's like that one style of pasta that you just have spent hours and hours like trying to get better and faster and more perfect at. Do you feel that that kind of obsession goes into other things, or are there some things that you're like, actually, I hate making this. I'm never making it again?
Yes, I mean like that's so the specific pasta is trofie and it
Okay.
comes from the northwestern region of Italy called Liguria. And I think I got hooked on it because it's this like interesting mix of like, it's definitely technically challenging. Lots of people say it's like the hardest pasta to make. And I think I kind of took that on as like a bit of a I think I was looking for something where it's like, okay, you can spend a lot of time here and, still not feel like you've perfected it. And I just felt like it was important for me to kind of as I go into food to find something where I could do it a lot and for a long time and still not get bored of it. And I think pasta overall is still something for me that I'm excited about, but like specifically this pasta shape, I feel like I have chosen it to be the thing that I kind of keep doing over and over again. And you only have so much time. And so like for me, like this is the thing that I kind of want to get a lot of reps in. It's like, in basketball, I grew up playing basketball. It's like you have to do your 10,000 hours or take however many shots from different spots. And this is like that repetitive thing where I'm trying to get it to like just pure muscle memory. And so I think for me, kind of like doing that is important because I feel like this, doing something to the point where you feel like you can actually call yourself, I mean, master is a really loaded word, but like to feel like you've put so much time into it where like someone else may not want to put that amount of time into something, I just feel like is important. But in addition to that, I feel like it just really helps to ground me and connect me to like Italian nanas. Like it's no longer a pasta that people really make at restaurants because of how time consuming it is. And so really it's like done by like, traditionally the woman in that region of Italy for their families because they just spent all day like putting love into that food. And so it just kind of feels like this way of connecting me to that tradition as well. And that like doing things for like the love of it or like the love of people versus, the trying to be overly efficient and whatnot, ways of kind of other ways I have to think about food to kind of make the finances work like we were talking about earlier. But then on the flip side, there's definitely things where I'm like, oh, I've done that once or twice and I don't care to like keep doing that or do that again.
Like what?
I mean, like right now, there's a little bit of this, like, I think as a chef, you do have people who lean sweet and savory.
Hmm.
I think like sweets for me for a while have been like an area that I just wasn't that curious about. Like when I was at school, my friend was teaching me this, like, we were making this kind of semifreddo, which is like a half frozen dessert. And we were like taking these popsicle sticks and sticking them into this dessert and then like dipping it in chocolate so that it has this like chocolate shell and it looks super, super pretty. And I was just like fucking that up over and over and over again and like double dipping so that the shell was too hard and so you can't crack it open. And I just like I feel like that entire afternoon just felt super incapable and um not confident in the kitchen. And I was like, I can I can go, a couple years without doing that again.
But I guess, what do you think is the difference then? Because I'm sure that the first time that you tried to roll out how do you pronounce it? Truffier?
Mhm.
The first time that you did that versus trying to do this chocolate shell coating. Like I'm willing to bet, no offense, like the first time you did the pasta shape, surely it was pretty bad. So like
Yeah.
what is the difference that, made you think I'm gonna invest a ton of hours into this one?
I mean, I don't know if I can put it like I think part of it is like I am more of a savory person, but I mean, even within the savory world, there's like a lot of things that you can choose. So I think it's more that like it's rare to find the one thing versus like there could be a lot of things that you try that you're bad at first that you just like don't feel that curious to keep doing. And then you come across the one thing that just feels special and you just want to do it. And so I think it's less not the dessert dipping thing and more just like somehow trophy captured my imagination and attention and I just naturally wanted to keep doing it, which is probably very improbable for everything else.
Yeah. I don't know though, like what a privilege it is to be in a place that, you can just kind of like chase after whatever sparks your interest,
Hmm.
I guess.
Totally. Um, yeah, I I feel definitely privileged to have found that thing for me.
Yeah, I'm curious what like the feedback has been like since you started. So how many dinners have you done now? You
We've
must be in
done
the
20.
20s, right?
We've done 20. Yeah.
20. Okay.
20
So
dinners, two pop-ups, three if you count one of the fundraisers, and two pasta workshops as well.
nice. Okay, so you're like hitting quite a variety now.
Hmm.
Has there been like any like one specific thing that you're like, oh wow, that was really good feedback, or whether it was constructive or just positive or encouraging?
It's been I mean, largely it's been very positive, which has been great just to kind of build up the confidence and everything. And I think like there are a few people who have consistently said that like the style of cooking feels like homey, inviting, cozy, like in terms of the flavors, in terms of also just like maybe the vibe of what I can provide here from my space, but also mixed with this like more refined approach, a little bit more like elevated plating, this type of stuff. So it feels like special as well. So I think that's kind of my style of cooking that I've gotten to so far is like, how do I make something feel equally approachable, but also like special? And like sometimes there's these little accents of like surprises or things you haven't eaten before, but it still feels like you went to like, a friend's home and like left feeling like nourished in the soul and the stomach. You know what I mean? So I think that that's been kind of what I've tried to do with the food so far. And I mean, I've also recently invited a couple of more established chefs who've come. And so like I think their feedback is interesting as well, just to kind of figure out how to incorporate into everything else. And some of the things that they said is like, like some of these courses felt like really good. Some of the other ones felt like not connected to the overall storyline that you're trying to tell. Or like some things feel a little bit more like you're a young chef who's learned a bunch of skills and you're trying to apply that to your food, or like some things feel perhaps a little bit like too many like components and you can try and simplify. And it's as I get some of this feedback, I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, how much of it do I want to act on and listen to, and how much of it is just like me and my expression and things like this.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard because, like, for the casual diner that comes, it's all just positive feedback, right? For the more experienced chef who comes, they also have like their own specific way of doing things that biases them as well. And so I think it's like you have to take it all, but you also have to really make sure you have an understanding of who you are so that you're not just like blindlessly following stuff that comes through.
But I think too, I don't know, it kind of makes sense with the young, like being just young comment because it's like, I don't know, I think in my 20s, it was very much like I needed to, as fast as possible, like wedge things into the conversation that like signaled that I was interesting. And then as I got older, I was like, I don't have to do that. I am interesting and I do have interesting thing to say. I think that's something that just kind of comes with like time and then
Yeah.
being sure of your own product. But something that I really like about the food that you make is that it kind of pushes the limits of what the average person might eat on the day to day. I remember the last time I was there was a woman who had never tried beef tongue, but like and obviously, like I mean, she was verbal about the fact that she was a little nervous about trying it,
Yeah.
but like because she had just had, I think, 3 courses before that that she really liked. It was like, I don't know, it was like a moment of trust where like she's kind
Yeah.
of looking around, like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna try it. And then she
Yeah.
liked it. So that was like kind of cool to see that it was like trust was built up over
Mhm.
part of an evening and then she was not let down.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like kind of expanding people's understanding of food and trying different things. Like that's for me, that's like a really big part of food is just like trying something for the first time. Like it gives me so much joy, and like sharing that with other people, I think is important. So I think if I can kind of manage to expose you to something that you may not have come across at some point, I think that's something that I take a lot of yeah, satisfaction in.
Because I know that you mentioned earlier, like seasonality is like obviously a huge influence on kind of the choices you make. Is there like any one kind of upcoming ingredient that you like have your eye on that you're like, come May, it'll be time for this or something that you're excited about?
I think every season has things to be excited about. And I really enjoy like also this challenge of like maybe things that normally people aren't that excited about and turning it exciting. So I mean like there's definitely popular ingredients that come with seasons, and it's like, okay, when you can get, the sweetest whatever or the freshest whatever, like mushroom season definitely comes to mind, right? Or, when you can get your hands on like, I don't know, beautiful strawberries that are like delicious and things like this. But on the other side, it's like, okay, well, like potato season is also really amazing and like comes with different varieties and like can be delicious, and onions and, shallots and things like this can also be like really, really, if you put time and attention into it, can be really interesting too. So everything kind of, at its freshest form. I mean, this is not something that is like a new opinion or whatnot or whatever, but like when you can pick the thing when it's meant to be eaten and you eat it in that time, it's like a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair description for sure. I guess I'm curious though, when you have people over at your house, has it ever happened before that like somebody throws an allergy curveball at you and you're like, well, that's this isn't gonna work, or
I try and get that before, um, and it hasn't happened yet that someone like has shown up and said like I can't eat this, which would definitely be tricky. Some things trickier than others. Like if someone came and said, I have a gluten intolerance, for instance, then all of a sudden, like all the pasta that I'm making would make it tough. So I think gluten would be especially tough. If like someone was like vegetarian, that's easy. But yeah, I think I try and screen some of that stuff out before they arrive and give me a little bit of time. The one that like people have been asking for and is obviously like popular in Berlin as well is vegan, and I haven't come up with a vegan menu yet. I think it's possible also with like there's a concept that I'm playing around with that's a little bit more like rustic and like sharing plates and things like this. I think with some of these, I could definitely see like a vegan menu starting soon. So yeah, trying to kind of appeal to all types of diets and like food. Yeah.
do you cook for yourself?
These days, less so.
Really?
I really, I mean, I cook a lot for other people, and I find myself like just walking to get simple food, like 3 euro falafels and things like this, or ordering food. Sometimes, like I have like a delivery bag right next to me of just like lunch. So I think it somehow like the more you kind of spend time cooking for other people, you like cook less yourself. And I think for me as well, like cooking has so much about like serving people and the joy of like providing that to someone that when I'm just cooking for myself, somehow I don't make the connection that like I'm also people and like cooking for myself is like nourishing myself. Somehow I don't make that connection as clearly.
So it's, something to unpack in therapy one day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But I guess,
I value myself just as much as I value cooking for others.
yeah. Um, when like making new, just like friends or, just people getting to know people, would it be like an immediately showstopper for you if you like met someone and they were like, I just like there are people out there who are like, I just don't really like eating. I don't like food. I don't like, I just don't like it. Like what would kind of be your like
It's hard. There's definitely judgment there. Like I had some friends, coming through the startup world like a few years ago. Do you know what Soylent is?
yeah, and
Yeah.
anyone drinking that, I'm like immediately, I think you're an awful person.
So there were a few people on my team that were like very pro Soylent. For those who don't know, like Soylent is basically like a powder drink that's supposed to give you all the nutrients in a day. And so if you drink three of them, you don't need to like eat at all.
It's like
And you just have
Huel
these
as well.
bottles at home where you just like pour water into it or milk and you just have that in your fridge. And some of my like coworkers, their entire fridge are just these bottles of Soylent.
No, but do you know what bothers me most about Soylent? So like there's Soylent and Huel. Sorry, I'm gonna go on a tangent.
Yeah, go for
But
it.
you know the name Soylent, you know the
Yeah.
the the movie?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like if nobody's heard of this, there's like this movie where this dystopian future and everyone's eating these Soylent crackers as like a nutritional supplement. And then it turns out like the twist at the end, spoiler alert, Soylent Green is made of like people that they're murdering. And then you're eating Soylent to get all your nutritional needs from like dead people in this dystopian world. And then like all these tech bros are drinking this Soylent
And they
drink.
decide
And I'm
to
like,
call
they've
it their
named
beverage.
it.
Yes. And so I can't, I have to say that you have to be really cool in all the other aspects of your life to get past the like, I'm not into food perspective. Like, I'm totally okay if you don't like cooking, but if you don't like eating food, like, I feel like that's a hard one for me to like feel like I can connect with you. Same thing with like, I don't like to dance. They're just two really big parts of my life. And like, if you don't feel comfortable sort of like letting loose on a dance floor or you don't feel comfortable like enjoying yourself eating, I feel like they're less my people.
Yeah, that's fair. And I do have a lot of patience for people who are like, I just never, I grew up in a chicken finger household and, I want to get to know I want to get to know other like food types. Like I have patience for that. Like if you're a curious person
Hmm.
or maybe like you just kind of grew up in a house that like, I don't know, you just didn't really dance. It just wasn't how you grew up and like, I don't know, then you go out and you start to get more comfortable. I can get behind that. But yeah, as far as I don't know. Yeah, people who are just totally like, "Oh, I hate it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's a bit
Yeah.
red flag."
Yeah. I mean, we're all kind of like product of circumstance for sure. And I think my food journey also is like, it's evolved with time. You know, when I initially said I loved food and I love to cook, it was still not very exposed to many, cuisines from around the world and things like this. And it took, I think, like one of the big growth moments for me was when I actually started traveling a lot more. Like that was really very influential on how I thought about food was like when I actually started to travel, what didn't happen until after university, really. And the places I went to before were kind of very one dimensional. And then I started kind of seeing the world more fully and meeting cultures that like, food is in their DNA from the moment they're born and that having a really profound impact. And then coming to Berlin as well, I feel like there's a lot of food that I wasn't as exposed to. A lot of food from like Africa, for instance, further into like kind of West Asia. Like some of this food I kind of was not as familiar with. And now have had a chance to kind of eat and love and yeah. So
Yeah, I do think that that's always interesting, like, kind of how immigration as well shapes, different cities and then the cuisine that exists there. I mean, it's the dumbest example, but, like, the food that Berlin is most famous for is the doner kebab, which is, like, actually, Turkish, but then with a German bread that, Turkish people changed and edited and expanded upon.
so much of food and what's interesting about food is about like migration and how like ingredients make its way or recipes make its way around the world and then applied in like the context of where it moved to. And so many interesting kind of cuisines have been born through that. So yeah.
Imagining Italian food without, the North American tomato or
Right.
South American
Right.
tomato. I don't even know where the tomato's from.
People think tomatoes and Italy are so like synonymous, but it, comes from Mexico and all this type of stuff. And noodles and stuff. Like people think dumplings come from Asia, like come from China or whatnot, but it comes from like Turkey and all this type of stuff. You just kind of like, there's like a book I was reading about how Italy got its citrus from Asia as well and this type of stuff. So it's just really interesting to kind of see how all of this migration ultimately impacts tasty food.
Really. Yeah, I think in general, well, I guess before I offer my opinion, what do you think in general about the Berlin food scene? Like, is it a player in, because when you think of like top food cities, I
Yeah.
think like, New York, London, for better for worse. I don't know if I pick
Okay.
London, but I would pick like Mexico City would probably be my number one. But where does
Cool.
Berlin stack up in your opinion?
I mean, I think there's some places where I visited where I'm like, man, the food here is out of this world. And more often than not, it's a food city that is so like where food is so embedded in the family household that it's like from the moment you're born, it's like there's just a love of food there. And I think what tends to happen in these places is that there's a really healthy street food culture and a really healthy amount of food that's just accessible to everybody. So it's like no matter what social class you're in, you still have a love of food. And like, for instance, some places I think about like Mexico as well, like Malaysia, like Penang that I went to, loved eating through Penang. Or like China, even like when I was in Beijing, Singapore, or Shanghai, and then in Singapore and Taipei, like some of these places really stand out to me. And it's like street food culture is really high and like you can find a meal that's delicious for like, $5 or less.
Mhm.
And so I think those tend to be the places that I think are like my favorite food cities. Whereas I think of like Toronto, where I'm from, I feel like for some types of food, maybe you can find like a sub $10 meal, but you kind of have to be outside of downtown. You have to go into like the suburbs and, like there's really good Caribbean food, for instance, in Toronto and things like this. But by and large, when you're like downtown, it's like you're spending $100 a person. You're buying wine and you're like kind of eating at these fancy shops. And I think there's places in the world like that where you go and it feels like the food is more reserved for a certain type of people, or the food scene that's exciting is a little bit more like that. And I think Berlin is kind of in the middle. Like I feel like there's a lot of really, good cheap food in Berlin. There's also a lot of interesting kind of new restaurants opening up. But it's also not like the people who love food. I don't think of like the like Berliner household growing up loving food. It's different than like when I think about Malaysia or when I think about Mexico City or like Italy, like the same love of food, it's not the same. But there's a lot of immigration to Berlin, and so those people are still in Berlin and kind of having their mark on the city as well. So, and then in just like overall cost wise, I think it's like a little bit easier to offer like a cheaper offering for food here, and you can get good meals for like the 10 euros or less thing. So I would put it in the middle, I guess, is like sort of the final answer.
I'm just laughing because my friend Nam, he's first generation Berliner. His parents are from Vietnam. And he was like, I swear, like it's the biggest indicator of whether I'm going to get along with somebody, like how they treated me as a child when I would be at their house at dinner time. He
Mhm.
was like, it was just crazy. Like people in Germany would be like, okay, go home. And he was like, that's insane to me. Like, I don't know. And because in his family, it was like, they're just shoving food down any visitors' throat. So I guess, yeah, I'm thinking he's Vietnamese and yeah,
Mhm.
it's just, yeah, he was talking about like the stark difference in food culture for immigrants. We were talking about it later and he was like, I knew I liked you because you were like, we used to live together. And he was like, I think you were cooking something in the kitchen and you literally were like, it's not that good, but like, do you want some? And I was like, yeah, I do. So
Mhm.
I don't know. That is. I do think that's an interesting insight, though, that Berlin is somewhere in the middle. Because, yeah, I think when you think of these like big food cities, you do think of like fancy fine dining, where are the best chefs. And I would agree that, yeah, the best food comes out of cities with a bunch of street stands and street stalls,
Mhm.
for sure. But yeah, Berlin is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
It's
I thought leaving Toronto, I thought Toronto was a good food scene at the time. I think I had a different perspective and like I was kind of eating through the fancier kind of food scene in Toronto. Not like super fancy, like fine dining Michelin star, but like still like, okay, like wine bars where you're spending like that 80 to $100 a meal. And then coming here, I thought like I didn't know much about German food or I didn't think much about German food. And that was the impression I had coming to Germany was that, oh, like I would be eating more German food. But what I found in Berlin is just like exposure to a lot of food where the person cooking it has lived in that region of the world in their lifetime.
Mhm.
Whereas like in Toronto, you get a lot of like, oh, my parents moved here and I'm doing the food and I'm gonna do some remix like kimchi tacos. A lot of that kind of thing. Whereas like here in Berlin, I think you get a lot of like, oh, like I actually moved here from Thailand and I'm like opening a Thai restaurant and the food still tastes like it's very much like connected to Thailand. As an example, I think I find more of that here in Berlin where I'm like exposed to pretty good food that feels authentic to where it's from.
Mhm. Minus the spicy.
Minus the spicy. Although some places are no longer minusing the spicy, which is good.
Really? I still No, actually, I went to Sankumoutsai and I literally looked at her in the eye and I was like, I want the big spicy. I was like,
Hmm.
I want it. And then at one point too, like I was kind of like crying through the meal and she like looked at me like, did I do it? And I was like, I'm so happy right now.
Because that's a feeling I like to have sometimes is like overwhelming spice,
Mhm.
especially
Yeah.
when it's this weather.
Yeah. I'm like, just clear me
Air the
out.
sinuses.
Yeah, totally. And then I guess, I don't know, my final question, if it was like a free meal, kind of whatever, whether that's an experience or a specific chef or a specific restaurant, yeah, what dining experience would you curate for yourself and or other people that you'd bring with? Doesn't have to be like the number one answer. It
I
can
think
also
I
be.
think the one that comes to mind is like so when I was in Italy, um, the culinary school I went to actually turned out it was like very catered towards international students, a lot of like actually American teachers and things like this. But we had this one lady who worked at the school. Her name was Maria. She was kind of like very much like tiny little Nona. She is like super capable. She like was hired, I think, to kind of help clean and wash dishes in the kitchen and things. But every now and then she would teach us like certain things as well. So there was a class where we learned how to make soppressata, which is like kind of like a spicy Italian sausage. And she came and taught us how to do that. Turns out she like butchers her own pigs, has her own farm, makes her own pasta, builds like I spent this afternoon building like a pizza oven with her. So I could just imagine like a Sunday at her place where like I'm helping out to like doing whatever tasks she tells me to do, but like we spend the whole day cooking like a meal for, I don't know, her family and maybe like some friends that I have and just like spending that day kind of cooking with her and having some like long table in the summer where we're pouring wine and just having this kind of like Sunday dinner as a family. I think that would be top for me right now.
Do you still keep in touch with her at all?
She doesn't have any digital like way of connecting, but I've thought about going back to the school and just like saying hi and stuff. But yeah, no, that she would like that afternoon building the pizza oven together was still like one of my favorite memories at school.
You should send that lady a postcard. I bet she'd
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
I like that answer though. All right. Was there anything else though that we didn't touch on or that you wanted to say or anything like that?
Maybe just like for whoever's listening who's thinking about, putting more time towards something that they're curious about. Like, I think following curiosity is something that I've just really learned in life as being like it's never going to lead you astray, following something that you're curious about and just exploring and just finding, you know, opportunities in life to just feed that. I think is like a really good use of time. So that's just one parting thing that I would say that's also really enriched my life.
I love that. Stay curious.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, and
Thank
have
you.
a wonderful day.
Yeah.